Alright. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Naven Gaming, where today we are reacting to the Sons of Horus! Finally. I've been waiting to see this one ever since yesterday when my fucking internet died on me. God. That was a fucking annoying thing. Anyways. But yeah. We are going to be watching, finally, The Sons of Horus by Warrior Tier. I've been wanting to see the part 3 to this series for the longest time. And now it's right here, finally, within my grasp. And Warrior Tier himself has given me his blessing. So that's even better. I hope that if Warrior Tier does end up watching this video, that, I just want to say, hey, hi, how you doing? Like what you do. I like the content that you create. I definitely think that by far Angron, Eater of the Worlds, which is something you can see right here at the bottom, it's still kind of one of my favorite videos in particular because it goes in depth as to why Angron is such a... It goes really in depth onto why Angron is such a sympathetic villain, despite the fact that he is an absolute piece of shit person. It really is a great video. It covers all of the bases, and it goes into detail as to retelling his story and from his perspective in such a interesting and thought-provoking way that I often, find myself debating what could happen if Angron just never got those damn nails. It really is something to think about. And a lot of people apparently think about this fairly often. But, yeah. That being said, we're going to go ahead and just jump right into it. The Sons of Horus by Warrior Tier. Please go like the video, subscribe, support your boy, because he supports this boy. And let me tell you, I could use the support sometimes, but I will never advertise it. Just go support the original creator. It means a lot. But yes, let's just go ahead and just get into it. Enough with the...
This video was made possible thanks to our incredible Patreon and YouTube members. If you want to help support us in creating more videos like this in the future, see behind-the-scenes footage and gain early access to our video releases, please consider supporting us on Patreon or YouTube memberships.
You heard it. Go support him on Patreon if you want more content like this, because I sure as hell do.
There is no other option. I will refuse to consider diplomacy. We must go to war.
You refuse to consider diplomacy? Have you forgotten who you are talking to?
This is the one time I go
You
full screen.
are a Mournival Lord, and your role is to advise. This is not your decision to make.
What you are considering is dangerous and misguided. You cannot consider a diplomatic resolution with these people.
Ezekiel, you are overstepping. You will not tell me what I can and cannot do.
We will no longer interact with these people.
Get out. Now.
You know what you are doing is wrong.
Get out. One more word, and I will strip you of your rank and elect a new first captain.
Damn. Bit of a falling out amongst the lunar wolves.
The silence in the chamber was suffocating, and no one dared to speak unless they were given explicit instructions to do so.
Tarek.
Yes, Lord.
Go find him. Calm him down. Advise him that I might be ready to listen to his apology in 2 hours. Suggest to him that when he apologizes, he will be on his knees and his voice will be whisper quiet.
Torgadon nodded and quickly exited the chamber. Aximand and Loken both turned to follow Torgadon, but Horus stopped them.
You two, stay here. I'd like to talk to you.
Aximand and Loken reluctantly sat before their war master and waited for him to speak. Horus closed his eyes. He took a deep breath, then exhaled before opening them again.
Horus, Garviel, please forgive me. Sometimes I am reminded of my Chthonian roots. Just as the magma erupts on Chthonia, I am prone to outbursts of my own. Ezekiel is too.
Horus reached over and grabbed 2 glasses and began filling them with wine. He handed one to each of them, then smiled before taking a drink himself.
The wise one and the quiet one. I didn't hear a word out of either of you while Ezekiel and I were screaming at each other. Advise me. Tell me how this looks through your eyes. I didn't agree with Ezekiel's approach, but what he said made sense. Did it? Tell me how. For more than 2 centuries, we have abided by particular doctrines. These doctrines are not discretionary, they're laws, and we fight every day to enforce them. The Interrex, their actions, their entire way of life, is so fundamentally opposite of what the Emperor has tasked us with upholding. Entering into diplomatic relations with them feels like we are straying from the Emperor's doctrines. What do you think, Garviel? Do you agree with little Horus?
The argument to go to war with the Interrex is sound, but I am interested in why you think it isn't.
At last, a thinking man.
So they're having a dispute about exercising a certain level of diplomacy with a group called the Interrex. That's interesting. I don't know. I don't think they were mentioned in the other video. No, that's right. It ended with them working with the Blood Angels to completely sack an entire planet full of like really fast-moving bugs. I do remember that now. But it is interesting that apparently they're having problems trying to exercise diplomacy while simultaneously debating about whether or not they should go to war with them. But so where exactly is Horus standing in this? Is he trying to be more diplomatic with them, or is he trying to be a bit more or is he trying to go to war with them? It sounds like Abaddon wants to just lay siege to the Interrex, but Horus seems to be wanting to try to approach this in a more diplomatic sense. I think that's kind of one of the best parts about Horus, is that he is willing to exercise a certain level of diplomacy when it comes to other worlds. But if what is being said is true, then trying to actually foster some type of relation with them kind of goes counterintuitive to the Emperor's will and the fundamental laws that guide the Imperium. And if that's the case, then it's interesting that they haven't bothered to just quickly sweep these people under the rug and just bring them into compliance like they typically do. I wonder why that is. That's a fascinating thing, because, you know, like, I can't imagine somebody like War Master Horus wanting to willingly just let a planet go simply because, you know, like, I don't know. I think this is actually getting to the pivotal point in the story where Horus is actually going to have that defining moment where he goes to war with I think it was probably the Interrex, but I could be wrong, where he tries to establish some level of diplomacy with a planet, but the planet's a very much a democratic like type of like a human-led world where they still exercise some level of democracy, among other things. I think that's the planet that we're getting into, because he does try to, at some point in the lore of 40K, before the fall, he does try to go into trying to like foster some type of relation with this planet and trying to kind of ease tensions. He's essentially, right, he tries to recruit them more so than really try to bring them into that compliance state. but it ends up, like kind of like all going to shit because of, well, I think it was because of Erebus and the word bearers, but yeah, we'll probably get more information on that as soon as we let it go further.
The comment from Horus ended the debate inside of Loken's head as to whom the War Master considered to be the wise one. Horus smiled, then stood up and slowly walked towards a mural on the wall. The mural was an enormous painting of the Emperor, stretching his arms out to surround the stars that were spinning by him.
Look at this painting. You see how he's scooping up all of the stars? When I first met the Emperor, beloved by all, one of the first things he told me was that the stars are the birthright of mankind. I was only a child, but I remember it so vividly. He pointed up to the dark night sky and told me that those glimmering lights were ours to master. Every little gleam of light that you see, imagine a different human culture, flourishing societies that are free of tyranny and injustice. He said to me, "Make no mistake, Horus, and they will be ours."
Only
That's an interesting statement. I mean, it's interesting that the Emperor, by the way, is the kind of person who wants mankind to be the masters of their own destiny. He essentially wants to make all of mankind into gods, which is kind of insane to think about. Like, he very much wants to put the power of defining their own destiny and divining their own fate into the hands of the everyman. But it's so weird to think about because that kind of runs antithetical to most dictatorships and most rulers because their goal is to just lead and guide more often than not. But it's interesting that the Emperor does choose the path to want to be a guiding light rather than just, a dogmatic sort of despot, though he does exhibit he does do a lot of the actions that do kind of exemplify that issue. He does do this, though, for the purposes of achieving the dream that he has for one day bringing mankind back into where it was prior to the fall and into the Dark Ages. The golden age of mankind, so to speak. But yeah, it's I would like to understand exactly why the Emperor is motivated to do the things that he does. Like, we have so many theories, so many about the Emperor, and none of them are really all that concrete outside of like a few snippets here and there about things that the Emperor actually says, as well as among other things. Like, I've never read most of the novels. Most of my information comes from a lot of lore tubers, among other things. So I can only scarce to imagine. But it's very interesting that despite everything, the Emperor has been consistent on one thing, which is that he wants to bring mankind back to its former glory, even if that means having to approach it in a very very almost zealous, dogmatic sort of sense, which kind of leads into the main reason why the heresy ends up happening. It also kind of touches upon why the Imperium falls in the way that it does, because, in a galaxy that seeks to destroy and harm you at every given turn, like a certain level and exercise of caution, weariness, as well as just being willing to just shoot first before asking the questions, kind of needs to be exercised. Survival of the fittest is the name of the game in this galaxy. Especially when your opponents are the Dark Eldar, the Tyranids, and among other things, right? Like, you kind of have to learn to kind of just be willing to just do a lot of action exercise a lot of action rather than words. But yeah.
moments before, Horus had been screaming in a fit of rage at Abaddon, but now that seemed like a lifetime ago, as Loken found himself completely captivated by the War Master's story. Horus was about to continue, but another voice interrupted from the back of the room.
But that didn't happen, now did it?
No, we got
Sanguinius entered the chamber, and Loken and Aximan jumped to their feet to offer their respects to the angel before he dismissed their attempt.
Sit down, you two. Let us hear Horus out.
My brother's rude interruption aside, he is correct.
I don't understand. What didn't happen?
The 3 words the Emperor said to me: make no mistake. Sadly, I have made mistakes.
I don't know what mistakes you speak of, Lord.
After our victory on Ulanor, there have been 2. The first of which happened on 6319. Our first conflict, following my elevation to War Master. I could have handled it differently, but I didn't. There was no need to bring violence to that world. Instead, I chose the wrong approach, and now I have the blood of Sejanus on my hands, along with so many others.
Lord, the deaths of those men were not because of any mistakes made by you. The people of 6319 were dug in. War was the only thing that would have resulted in compliance.
I appreciate your defense, Gaviel, but you're wrong. Problems can be solved without blades and bolters. The Emperor could have persuaded them without violence, and I should have been able to do the same.
I disagree.
And then there's the tragedy of murder, a dreadful pit of spiders. Look at all the warnings we ignored. We were impatient and impulsive. We barged in. Hundreds of our own died. And for what? To disturb a world of creatures that had been purposefully kept away for the safety of those roaming the cosmos.
We didn't know, Horus. No one knew.
But we should have known. Had we been thinking, we could have spent more time translating the messages in their relays. But we didn't think. We jumped in, our minds set on war.
It's interesting that he brings this up. I don't want to pause too much, but it is interesting that he brings this up because everything that he's saying is pointing at the sense that, yes, Horus does have a lot of respect for the Emperor. Even up to this point, he still has a lot of respect for the Emperor as not just as his father, but also as the leader of mankind, and also the one who helped to bring him into this world. But the interesting factor that I'm getting from this is that he definitely wants to embody the Emperor in a lot of ways, but he also recognizes that he severely contrasts than many others. But that's kind of by design, because the Emperor wanted more killing machines that were a bit more honorable and respectable than the ones like, say, the Thunder Warriors. You know, like the mad berserkers who would just murder things when given the cue to do so. Like, he wanted more thinking... Okay. Sorry about that. Anyways, they wanted more thinking, sort of more, they wanted more thought-provoking from... He wanted more of a thought-provoking nature from his soldiers rather than just, go murder and kill this thing and then just be done with it. That was the whole purpose of making the Space Marines in the first place. But it's interesting that they're kind of having to come to grips with this fact, not even knowing this is probably a result of what the Emperor kind of wanted from them in the first place. And that's not even touching upon the things as to why he created the Custodes as well, because they are kind of a little too good at killing Space Marines, especially Chaos Space Marines. It's kind of otherworldly, but, we're not going to delve further into that. It's just interesting to see how they're basically touching on this aspect in this issue of their design without actually directly addressing it. And it's so funny to see. It's kind of fascinating because it makes you question just how much they actually know about their own making, as well as like the purpose and reasons for why they exist and why they were built in the first place. Like, Space Marines are all often made, and even the Primarchs were genetically made by the Emperor specifically. So it really does beg to wonder how much they actually know and how much of their purpose has been, has been described to them by the Emperor of Mankind himself. But, yeah, I'm sure there's probably something there. There's probably something somewhere out there that probably talks about how much the Emperor tells his soldiers about what he actually thinks of them, what he actually wants from them, about the purposes to why they actually exist. But I have, like, again, that will require us doing more lore diving, and I have yet to see anything of it. I'm sure more lore enthusiasts could probably answer that question. But, yeah, in any event, it's just interesting.
You have just described the fundamental difference between the Imperium and the Interrex. We cannot and will not tolerate the existence of Xenos. Had the Interrex finished the job and destroyed the Megarachnid, we wouldn't be having this discussion. But they exiled them to a world where they were made to be prisoners, and good men died because of their ineptitude. You are right, little Horus, in that there is a fundamental difference between us and the Interrex. But I'm afraid that difference isn't what you think it is. The Interrex has found a way to flourish without resorting to bloodshed, while we decimate everything that stands in our path. Which one of us is more humane? I stand with Ezekiel on this matter. We cannot allow ourselves to become so weak as to tolerate Xenos. The Interrex has trained the Kinebrak to exist within their culture. Through their approachment, they have strengthened themselves. The Kinebrak are horrid things, Lord. They offer no strength to their culture. I will not make another rash decision. I've just spoken of the 2 premature decisions that I've already made. I will not allow myself to make a third. I'm going to be patient, and I'm going to learn from the Interrex. I am going to analyze their methods, immerse myself in their way of thinking. After that, I can evaluate if our path has strayed too far. But the days of impulsive war are behind us. The Interrex are admirable people. Perhaps we can learn from them.
That is such an interesting sort of dissection there. Horus is literally saying we should probably stop trying to kill people and stop trying to force people into thinking and believing in the things that we do. And maybe we should actually start trying to take a little bit of the knowledge and sort of like sophistication and culture of other cultures and try to learn, engage their way of life and their way of approaching things to maybe better equip ourselves to be also better in turn. And it's so interesting that this is the conversation that they are having right now, because this is the absolute this is going to absolutely epitomize why the Imperium is such dog shit later. It's because they are none of these things. They are zealots. They are hardcore religious zealots in the future. It's so fucking fascinating. And Horus is literally the guy who's going to help to bring it into existence. So even before that, he too was basically like, hey, let's exercise diplomacy. Let's actually start asking questions. Maybe we should actually look at ourselves and think to ourselves, are we really that much better than the people we're actually going to war with, that we're trying to bring into quote-unquote compliance? Are we really any better? Are we really so different? It's such an interesting thing. I'm so intrigued. I'm so fascinated by this. It's gonna make the fall either hit that much harder, or it's gonna hit so hard it's gonna feel like whiplash, because it's gonna come out of fucking nowhere. And from what everyone that I've heard talk about the subject, they say that it literally feels like there is 0 to 100 approach when it comes to Horus's turn, because it's almost like they went on a fast track to get him to the point of actually committing the heresy, which is kind of a shame, but I can't wait to see how it's portrayed in this. Timberland and Scarlet Loken, the Fox and the Boy, Mississippi Metal. Some of these guys are actually creators, but I don't recognize most of these names either. Ooh, Erebus is in here? Oh yeah, definitely. We're gonna get some truly maniacal shit in this one. Based on the Dan Abnett novel. You know, in case anybody's interested to go pick up the original books, please do. It's all based off of that story as well. 5 weeks later.
Loken watched in silence as 50 soldiers clad in green metal armor marched onto the vengeful spirit.
Ooh, salamanders? Oh, Dark Angels.
One of the flagship's embarkation decks had been cleared from top to bottom to host the diplomatic meeting. It was truly a sight to behold. The entirety of the first company assembled in 2 lines, and the Mournival stood in the empty aisle between them. Like First Company, the Mournival stood in full armor, except for Horus, whose bare head was on display. After 48 hours of intership communication and profound diplomacy, it was agreed that they would hold a meeting on the vengeful spirit. A diplomatic meeting, where the Luna Wolves would host their new guests, the Interrex. These humans led the interstellar craft that Horus initially thought to be support vessels for the Megarachnid, and after exchanging intership transmissions, it was determined that their languages were similar enough to communicate without issue. As the 50 soldiers of the Interrex assembled on the embarkation deck, 20 more followed behind them. These soldiers were shorter and bulkier, and wore brown and gold armor. Loken assumed by their appearance that they were stronger, heavy troopers. The last of the Interrex to descend onto the deck were a group of 5 envoys and a larger group of instrument-wielding men that were referred to as Materge players. The Interrex shared little resemblance with the Astartes of the Luna Wolves. Their soldiers were tall, almost as tall as the Astartes, but their technology differed completely. Their armor was nowhere near as bulky as the Luna Wolves' ceramite plates, and their weapons seemed primitive by comparison.
Bows? They approach us in a ship almost twice the size of the Vengeful Spirit, and then come aboard carrying bows?
They're ceremonial, I'm sure. Those would be of no use in actual combat.
Neither would their armor. There's no chance that would protect them against any real weapon.
It's about the skill behind it.
The person that Horus presumed to be the lead envoy approached him and stood directly in front of him.
I greet you on behalf of the Emperor.
The Materge players began gently playing their instruments, and Horus abruptly stopped speaking.
Our translation form.
They played melodies that, to the untrained ear, sounded like music. It was known as the aria, and these harmonic melodies were played during any vocalized conversation with the Interrex.
It's quite disruptive.
Horus smiled as he spoke, to inform the envoy that he held peaceful intentions.
It is for comprehension purposes only. It provides clarity to conversation.
We seem to be understanding one another quite clearly.
Then I will instruct them to stop.
No. We will communicate as you do. Let them continue.
The envoy nodded, and the aria carried on.
I greet you on behalf of the Emperor of Mankind, beloved by all, and in the name of the Terran Imperium.
I accept your greetings, and return them on behalf of the Society of the Interrex.
Thank you for your kindness.
I just remembered something.
And for yours. Is this true?
Give me 1 second. I'm just going to pause this. Alright, there we go. Sorry for that momentary pause. I had to make sure I'd had to deal with something first.
That you are from Terra.
Thank you for your kindness.
And for yours. Is this true? That you are from Terra?
It is.
Old Terra, that was once known as Earth. You are able to verify this.
Oh, so they do know what Earth is in this universe. Fascinating.
Horus smiled and nodded at the envoy.
Of course I can. Are you familiar with Terra?
Very much so. We are also Terran. It was our own world ages ago. If what you are saying is true, then this meeting holds great significance. It has been thousands of years since we have encountered anyone from Terra.
This is why we travel the stars, in hopes of locating the lost families of mankind.
I am Dayath Shen, Abrocarius.
I am Horus, War Master.
Dayath's smile faded, and he frowned as he spoke to Horus.
War Master.
It is the title given to me by the Emperor of Mankind. I am his proxy, and his most senior officer.
The title of War Master is powerful. It implies hostility. Does your fleet have military ambitions?
We are comprised of military components. The galaxy is quite dangerous. We would place ourselves at considerable risk if we were to roam it unarmed. I see that your men are also armed.
Dayath Shen looked over the vast deck, his eyes meeting the stares of hundreds of Luna Wolves Astartes.
We strategically placed advisory beacons throughout the system. These beacons transmitted a warning that Eurysarak was uninhabitable. You ignored our warnings and assaulted the world with unprecedented aggression. It appears that your military components are considerable.
In a short time from now, we will meet in a more intimate setting.
And also, by far, the only thing that seems to matter. Not only is the military might considerable, it's more often than not the go-to for just about every scenario, you know, as is the usual with most Space Marine chapters, factions, among other things.
If an apology is in order as a result of our actions, it will come directly from me. For now, allow us to welcome you in peace.
Horus turned and signaled to First Company. Every Astartes in the embarkation deck locked off their weapons and removed their helmets. Shen made his own signal, and his frontline warriors and Mater's players removed their visors. The Interrex and the Astartes both stared across the aisle, their human eyes meeting each other for the first time. But as the squat, heavy troopers in brown and gold armor removed their helmets, the atmosphere changed, because the faces underneath their armored helms were anything but human.
Oh.
A smaller group was led into the War Master's private audience chamber, and they were seated at a long table. The 5 Interrex envoys sat on one side of the table with 2 Mater's players standing behind them, and the Mournival sat opposite of the envoys. With the exception of Horus, everyone in the Mournival was visibly uncomfortable, but no one wore it as openly as Abaddon. Seated at the far end of the table was the source of Abaddon's anger, the Kinnebrak. The Kinnebrak were an advanced species that had existed for well over 15,000 years. Prior to Terra's first age of technology, the Kinnebrak had already developed a flourishing civilization that consisted of multiple worlds. They were encountered by the Interrex, and a 100-year-long war broke out, with their territory being the root of the conflict. The Interrex eventually reigned victorious, but instead of exterminating the alien Kinnebrak, they established peaceful relations, and the Xenos eventually came to be citizens of the Interrex. Upon learning that the Interrex had coexisted with the Kinnebrak for the past 3,000 years, the Mournival was aghast. A human species accepting Xenos and integrating them into their culture was completely contrary to the principles established by the Emperor of Mankind. Abaddon couldn't stop looking at them, nor could he help himself from shaking his head in disgust and grimacing at their appearance. Their flesh was a dark blue color, and their mouth and nose were one combined organ with a trifold split at the end of their snout. There was an odor to them that was unmistakable, and while not terribly offensive, there was no question that it wasn't human.
They sound like Tau.
It is true that we won the war. But it's what we learned during the war that was much more impactful.
What is it that you learned?
We learned how powerful compassion is. Understanding and empathizing with a species can be a more valuable tool than any weapon you carry. Take the Kinabrak, for example. We couldn't communicate with each other because we were unable to comprehend the other's spoken language. This is why we developed the area. It was a way for us to communicate with alien cultures without the need for language. Once the area was fine-tuned and improved upon, we were able to build an understanding that was strong enough to welcome them into our own culture. To this day, the Kinabrak remains a vital part of the Interrex.
I can't say our experience has been similar to yours, Abracarius. We have found nearly all Xenos life forms to be openly aggressive. Their hostility eliminates communication from being a viable option.
Not all species we have encountered have shown interest in communication. We have experienced many who have violent intentions.
And how do you handle those species?
You saw it with your own eyes on Urisarak. Though it is never our first choice, there are cases where conflict is the only option. Take the... what was it that you called them?
The Megarachnid.
The Megarachnid. We made many attempts to bargain with them, but we arrived at the conclusion that they only existed to reproduce and grow their territory. Their very nature began to threaten our population, so we went to war with them. After their defeat, we were still unable to reach any mutual peace terms, so we gathered the remaining species and relocated them to Urisarak. This allowed them to live, but without risking the security of the Interrex or anyone else in the galaxy. The beacons we placed throughout the system were designed to warn anyone from going to Urisarak.
Why not destroy them? You said it yourself, that they showed no willingness to communicate with you. You had already gone to war with them. What stopped you from killing them all?
We have no right to cause the extinction of any species, regardless of how incompatible our cultures are. The Megarachnid were one of the very few examples where peace was unable to be reached. They were the exception, not the rule.
Abaddon was about to respond to Shen when Horus interrupted him.
I commend your methods, Abracarius. Your humble approach is admirable, and we owe you an apology. We made a mistake, which has resulted in your peaceful exile being ravaged. The Imperium offers its most sincere apologies for this offense.
That was an interesting sort of discussion. But I feel like that I can already see the biggest problem with this culture is that what Albricarius is suggesting here is that he rather, in the similar ways to the Imperium, would rather bring other species into a form of compliance as well, but would rather, instead of just eliminating them outright, he wants to just exile them in a place where they can just run wild, but without hurting anybody in the process. Which I could see why that would be a good decision. I mean, like, even us as a species, you know, like, even now in this day and age, you know, like, we're often trying to sustain and cultivate near extinct species of different animals and bugs, among other things, even today. But I think the real interesting question is like, if these bugs were as dangerous as they were, I mean, they were dangerous enough to kill Astartes, for fuck's sake. Does it really matter if you keep them around, or wouldn't it be better to just destroy them outright? You know, like, this is an interesting question. Like, where is the line here? Especially in a galaxy where everything, more often than not, is trying to hurt or kill you. It really is a question of, like, is it worthwhile to keep them around? should we actually let them continue to exist, or should we just hunt them down to extinction so they don't hurt anybody else ever again? It does raise an interesting question. It's kind of the quandary we would be faced if the dinosaurs were still around, right? Like, because if the dinosaurs still existed, we'd probably be asking ourselves a similar question. It's just like, okay, well, these giant reptilian animals are bigger than us. They're sometimes faster, potentially, and they even have the, like, they can easily scoop us up and just nom us to death. Is there really any sort of way we could coexist with them, or would it be better off just to eliminate them? Especially if we're talking about, not just how big they are, but also potentially how strong they are as predators. Like, because there's no way in hell that that in the society we have today, that if dinosaurs still existed, none of the things that we have built for ourselves would actually make sense to actually thwart or ward off those said predatory animals. Because, T-Rexes are big. They probably could just smash our houses and made of plaster and wood into nothing. They could do literally anything. We also have much bigger, less predatory animals that just eat foliage, among other things, in that time period as well. And if they were still around, they would still pose a threat, because if they got spooked, they would just stampede right into human territory, and they just inadvertently slaughter and kill several people. There's so many questions to be had about the state of our world and our society and our culture as human beings, as a species, if the dinosaurs were to still exist. It actually does raise an interesting question of what humanity would be like today if the dinosaurs were still around and still walking among us to this day. Like, what would our technology look like? What would our cultures look like? What would we be as a species if we were having to contend with predators far bigger and potentially faster than us? And since we're more stamina-based hunters, like, it strikes the reason, right, that we would be not the most superior creature in the food chain, certainly by far, when it comes to this. We're just craftier than most. So it really does beg a question, doesn't it? But yeah, let's just move on. I'm kind of tangenting at this point, but it does raise an interesting point and question of, like, what does this actually do meaningfully long term? Like, yeah, you could just exterminate these bugs, or you could put them on this planet to exile them, but what would either choice serve? Like, unless you're planning to use those bugs later down the line to potentially use as, like, a sort of, like, a self-defense form of militarized, like, bug infestation, kind of like a, drop pod, release them into, like, a population and watch them go completely apeshit. Like, I don't see any real utility or purpose in wanting to keep them around. But, that's also exactly what makes the Imperium so heartless. This really does raise some interesting questions and implications that I would like to see more discussions around.
Between the 6-month war on murder and another week of negotiations with the Interrex, Horus had no time at all to concentrate on anything else. But throughout the stars, there were other issues that required the War Master's attention, and his singular focus on murder and the Interrex had caused a growing list of urgent tasks to pile up. Malachurst had been holding back war petitions for Horus to review, asking the petitioners to be patient until the War Master had time to review their requests. 42 expedition fleets had requested the War Master's advice, and they were growing restless as their signals went unanswered for months. More pressing than any other matters, however, were those that concerned the War Master's brothers. 5 Primarchs had sought the personal audience of Horus, and he knew he could ill afford to ignore these requests much longer. Ever since Horus was named War Master, his relationship with the Lion, Primarch of the Dark Angels, was contentious at best. So when it was brought to the attention of Horus that the Lion had sought his personal audience to discuss matters of war, it became a chief priority. Ignoring the opportunity to improve relations with his brother for much longer could result in the opportunity being squandered. Yet the negotiations with the Interrex pressed on, and with each new day, new messages and requests were arriving for the War Master. And the weight of each unanswered missive began to press down on the mind of Horus with crushing force.
Horus, I have spoken with Russ. I know you are preoccupied.
Our petitions have once again gone unanswered. At the behest of Primarch Dawn, we have attacked the most densely populated area.
Horus, dare I ask if I'm not important enough to speak to you without being frozen out by your expert?
The Alpha Legion has been sent on behalf of Lord.
If you could spare at least one 10-man squad, your wound,
Lord Warmaster.
Lord Warmaster, please. You must know that Terra alone cannot oversee such an extensive process. Remember, we are masters to over 1,000 worlds now. The time is now.
I disagree, Lady Rathbone. Some of these worlds are hanging on to compliance by a single thread. Taxation will push them over the edge. Their people will revolt.
The Imperium must begin to support itself.
It is too early. The smoke hasn't even cleared on many of these worlds. They are still rebuilding from the ground up.
The Emperor has insisted upon this issue.
Has he?
I received the order directly from Malkador the Sigillite. Tributes must be collected, and a process must be implemented so that these collections are withdrawn on a routine basis.
This is premature. This can be done, but it will take time. If we force the issue and implement taxation now, we are almost certain to fail.
The Emperor has insisted upon this issue.
Just to clarify, is that the Emperor, beloved by all?
Yes, Captain. That Emperor. I have a duty to perform, and that is what I am doing here. If you take issue with this, perhaps you should bring your concerns to the Council of Terra.
Thank you for your time, lady. Allow me to discuss this with my advisors. I will prepare a formal response for your delegation soon.
She nodded at Horus and turned for the door, but not before directing a menacing glare towards Loken.
Oh, you didn't like that interjection, did she?
I've spent a great deal of time thinking about who may eventually challenge us for control of the stars. I used to think it would be the Eldar. Their power isn't what it once was, but it would be foolish to underestimate them. More recently, I've thought it could be the Orcs. But a new threat has emerged. One that is more dangerous than the combination of those two Xenos races. And that is our own tax collectors.
Of all the issues that rest upon the shoulders of Horus,
Taxation, the worst kind of slavery. The Russian Badger said it himself. It is by far the worst thing to ever be invented outside of politicians and lawyers. It truly is the worst.
That which was delivered by Elena Rathbone of the Exector Administrators was the most damning of them all. Malachurst and the Mournival brothers laughed, but Horus' face was stone serious.
I wish I were joking. What the Exectors and the Council of Terra are asking of us could destroy so much of what we've worked for. There will be uprisings, many of them, and all of the progress made during this crusade will disappear.
Oh, but the Emperor has insisted upon this. Don't you remember?
I find that hard to believe. My father would never agree to something that would cause so much instability. He must be too consumed with his own work to know about this. That's the only sensible explanation. Our empire was forged by warriors, and at the peak of our supremacy, we've handed over control to civilians and clerics. This is too much and too soon. These administrators need to be slowed down. We need to provide them with staggering amounts of data to inspect, and for every world. If we can drown them in documents, we can overwhelm them and delay this ridiculous plan.
It will only keep them on the sidelines for so long, Lord. They have already provided preliminary tithe figures and calculation methods for many worlds.
Do it anyway. Overload them with information. Just slow them down any way you can. I need room to breathe.
I'll get to work on this at once, my lord.
The Lion wants to sit down with me, as does Alfarius, and Lord Commander Varvarus has a list of requests.
Other brothers, too. Vulcan and Kurz are the most recent to reach out, and Throne knows how many expeditions.
And yet, it feels like returning to Terra and confronting the Council is more imperative than anything else.
What a cruel predicament.
When I was named War Master, I couldn't have dreamed that the Council of Terra would be who I would be going to war with. I was not wrought for this.
Then we should consider the Interrex, Lord.
Oh, there he is.
First Chaplain Erebus of the Word Bearers had arrived 2 weeks prior, and like everyone else, he was seeking favor from the War Master. But almost immediately upon his arrival, he realized that Horus was under a prodigious amount of pressure, and felt it best to postpone approaching him with his hands out. Instead of adding to the War Master's ever-growing list of inquiries, Erebus opted to help him. He began providing counsel and advising the War Master and the Mournival anytime they requested his assistance. Erebus already had a strong relationship with Aximand, Abaddon, and Torgadon, and after joining the expedition, he wasted no time in establishing a solid bond with Loken. For this, Erebus was universally welcomed and appreciated. The War Master had begun to grow tired of the seemingly endless line of people asking something of him.
What a slippery little bastard. Erebus is truly the worst. This motherfucker is not only a piece of shit, he's not only just scum, but he's actually just a fucking sociopath. What a fucking garbage human being. It really does. You cannot stress this enough. This guy is the literal fucking worst. Ugh. Everyone says that this is the guy who's going to help bring about the heresy. He's going to be the direct cause to why Horus ends up going down the heretical path in the first place. And I'm curious to see how in great detail he's going to accomplish this. I know the rough story of how he does this, but it's really going to be interesting to see how he is betrayed. And I'm probably going to love and equally as much as hate his betrayal, because Erebus is just such a, he's someone that you just love to hate, according to everyone, and I'm so here for it. Let's fucking go.
Erebus was invited to dine with the Mournival, to drink with them and Horus in their private chambers, and to counsel them on various matters related to the Crusade. By all appearances, he was stepping onto the vengeful spirit to help, and this was a refreshing change.
I agree with you, Erebus. I'm being pulled in every direction, with everyone trying to convince me that their situation should be a top priority. But the Interrex cannot be ignored. They are a significant new culture, and they control a considerable amount of space. Abracarius Shen has proposed a summit, a face-to-face meeting with their leaders on Zenobia. I will attend this summit. Then we must decide how to handle them. Either we welcome them as allies, or we go to war.
Interesting. How also very on the nose for fucking Games Workshop to call the planet they're gonna meet the Xeno leaders Zenobia.
A sleek escort barge descended towards the landing port that rested within the capital city of Zenobia. Horus didn't know what would come of the summit, but he knew that the ramifications for the Imperium would be far-reaching regardless of the outcome. With him, he brought a party of over 500, and almost no one was excluded. Horus wanted to present his people in a different light for this historic meeting, and he intended to do so by showcasing a different side of the Imperium. Instead of a group consisting only of heavily armored, blade-wielding Astartes, Horus would be welcomed onto Zenobia surrounded by teachers, poets, and artists. The capital was called Zenobia Principis, and while it did not appear to be a fortress city, Horus was certain that it had defensive capabilities that were not on public display. The Interrex, to their credit, conveyed the impression that they were just as intent as Horus in ensuring that the summit was successful. They provided the Imperium with lavish accommodations in a segment of the city known as the Extranus, and appointed Maturge players, personal servants, and city officers to be on standby, ready to serve them at all times. The Imperial Party was broken into smaller groups and given a guided tour of the capital city, and the War Master's group included the Mournival and Iterator Chiral Cinderman. His particular group was led by Abracarius Shin, and he was impressed with what he saw. Zenobia Principis wasn't as enormous as some of the super hives of Terra, but the city was incredibly sophisticated. All of the architecture throughout the capital was intricately designed, and it was obvious that the Interrex possessed extraordinarily advanced technology. Eventually, their tour stopped outside of a grand building that resembled a museum. Horus was introduced to the senior Interrex representative who would be leading the summit.
Welcome to Zenobia Principis. I am Jeff Tenord, General Commander. You must be the War Master.
That is correct. Thank you for hosting us, General Commander. This is a beautiful city.
I trust that you and your party have been treated with care.
We have, and we thank you for your kindness.
I'll be guiding your group for the remainder of the tour. If you'll follow me, I'd like to show you all the Hall of Devices.
As they marveled at the beauty of the structure and the colossal size of the hall's chambers, Horus couldn't help but appreciate the Interrex's eye for detail. From the perfectly chiseled statues and the opulent murals on the chamber walls, every element of the Hall of Devices was refined.
The Hall of Devices has stood in this city for centuries. At one time it served as the armory for our military. It is now a museum, open to civilians and guests of Zenobia Principis.
Unlike the Astartes of the Mournival, Horus was wearing robes instead of his armor. He made a point to show great interest in everything that Nod was pointing out, and asked many questions about the artifacts and weapons on display. Abaddon and Aximan didn't share the War Master's disposition, and seemed annoyed by the General Commander.
This reeks of condescension. They keep their weapons on display in a museum because they are so advanced, they're beyond war.
I find it offensive. I feel like they're mocking us.
Nod led them into a new chamber that was bathed in a soft blue light. There were artifacts on display, but they were held in stasis, and they looked unlike any of the others that were displayed in the previous chambers.
This chamber is very unique. It is where we keep the weapons of the Kinnebrak. As a gesture of duty to us, the Kinnebrak have ceded their bearing of arms and relinquished their weapons. Unless extreme circumstances arise and permission is granted, these alien weapons will remain in stasis forever. The Kinnebrak technology is exceptionally advanced, and we have deemed many of their weapons too lethal to be unsecured.
Interesting.
Nod seemed to be expecting questions or comments about the weapons, but he was surprised when no one said a word. The Imperial Party looked at the Kinnebrak technology in silence, and they felt weary being in the vicinity of alien devices. With the exception of a few blades, the vast majority of the strange Xenos armaments resembled boxes and rings, and didn't appear deadly at all. Iterator Cinderman pointed to one of the blades and asked Jeff to nod a question.
May I ask, General Commander, what is so dangerous about this dagger? A blade is just a blade. I fail to see any lethality that constitutes keeping it in securement.
It may appear to be just a blade, but these weapons are bespoke. The metals used to craft these blades are sentient, and were created using techniques that we have forbidden. We refer to these blades as anathames. You would not use an anathame blade like you would a normal sword. They are designed for use against a specific target. Once a person or being is defined, the blade becomes, in essence, the nemesis of its target.
How does that work?
We don't know. The Kinnebrak have tried explaining it to us, but we've never been able to comprehend it. Something to do with the process of forging the blade defies technical evaluation.
It requires the use of warp-based sorceries, among other things, I'm sure. It probably does require injecting a spirit into the blade for that to actually function properly, which, honestly, that'd be kind of interesting and also very dope. Imagine that the blade itself has a mind of its own, but it has the ability to impart with you, like, a level of knowledge and use of that blade upon experiences from other wielders. And not only that, but it could probably also be thrown and can also be used as a projectile that goes towards its target and also comes back to its wielder if it bonds with that wielder. I can probably see some actual potential for these blades, these anatheme blades, but since they haven't been really explained in a way that makes sense to the humans, both for this culture and even to the Astartes here and the Imperium's scholars, it's going to be an interesting question as to what they actually do. I think that, if nothing else, that would be that would be a pretty cool idea. I just don't... Yeah, it's an interesting process, I imagine, to see Xenos technology utilize different forms of techniques and ways of creating certain devices in order to essentially get more of a use. Like, nothing is just a simple thing, I'm sure, to most Xenos races. Everything has some level of, like, extra utility to it. And I imagine that the anatheme blades would absolutely be a really interesting sort of addition for Astartes in particular, but I don't really see Astartes using them because, again, it's made by Xenos, and they don't use technology that isn't, that doesn't come from STCs or the whatnot. So, yeah, everything is practically heresy to them, especially in the 41st millennia.
Do you mean a curse?
I've never thought of it that way, Iterator, but that word describes it well.
Hmm.
2 weeks had passed. 2 weeks of relentless negotiations and meetings until the late hours of the night. And there was nothing to show for it. It seemed that no matter how positive the meetings had gone, the Interex were determined to keep the War Master at an arm's length. They were intrigued by the Imperium and made it clear that they had no desire to cease discussions with a people that shared their same ancestral past. Still, the two sides were not making progress, and the feeling was that they were headed towards an impasse.
It might be because of the Lunar Wolves themselves rather than anything that Horus is doing, but granted, I think Horus trying to bring them in line and trying to get them and trying to help the Astartes understand his position on this is also just as much of a failure on his part than anything else, because she's tried to explain his reasoning for all this, but they're not accepting it. They're just not having it. They just don't care to. They're having a hard time really accepting and understanding his position on this, which is why it's leading to this issue. So, yeah, I'm not sure what to say or make of this other than that. It's really more of an issue from the Imperium side, I imagine, that it really is for the Interex. Though I'm sure that the Interex is probably keeping them at arm's length predominantly because they could probably sense the sheer bloodlust coming from them. And by this point, they're probably thinking that they're too war-crazed and they're too warrior-centric to really be, like, willing to want to, like, truly negotiate for peace or really want to approach peace talks in any meaningful way. So they're probably not. So they're probably just as confused as to what to do as Horus and the Astartes are. So I think it's just a whole bit.
I see no point in continuing diplomatic conversations with the Interex. We've exhausted all possibilities, Lord. They've not budged in any meaningful way. They're open to trade agreements of minimal scale and some cultural exchange, but nothing more. It's been 2 weeks and they have not been willing to discuss the subject of alliance.
Or compliance.
Compliance is not an option. They are regarding us with significant caution, and attacking them will only confirm their worst suspicions of us. We cannot enforce compliance.
Yes, we can.
Then I am saying we will not.
I've never known the Imperium to be worried about hurt feelings. The Interrex are humans, just like us. They are resisting their duty to stand with us for the glory of Terra.
Does anyone else care to share their input?
They have shown no desire to consider alliance, yet they are equally opposed to war. They acknowledge our ideals, but insist on pursuing their own destiny and remaining independent.
War. That is the only answer. Why are we wasting our time?
Ezekiel, we are not going to war. They control more than 30 systems. The scale of a war with the Interrex is too large. Even if I was open to the idea of war with them, which I am not, now is not the right time.
Lord, between the initial meetings with their envoys and this summit, we have been embracing them with open arms for more than a month. They have shown no willingness to form an alliance. They refuse to consider our ideals. They openly accept alien influence into their culture. Why are we tolerating this, Lord? We have never turned a blind eye to our principles before, and it sickens me that we are doing so now.
I've heard enough, Ezekiel.
Ezekiel has a point, Lord. The chasm between the society of the Interrex and the Emperor's model of humanity is too vast. Unless they are willing to adapt their way of life to one that aligns with the Emperor's ideals, then I see war as the only viable option.
Is it just me, or do I feel like that so far what we've learned of the Interrex is actually kind of indicative to what the Emperor wishes humanity to be at some point in the near future? Like, these are not necessarily fighters, these are predominantly scholars, and they're people who wish to learn and understand the universe. They're also just technologically advanced enough to make that into a thing. Though they have control of 30 systems, I can definitely see that a culture that's more scientifically advanced enough and is more open to questioning their surroundings and engaging with, like, different types of ways of thinking, among other things, is probably the ultimate path that the Emperor will eventually want humanity to go down the road of anyways. The only reason why it's not there at this point is because he's trying to reestablish humanity, and once he firmly is able to reconnect all of humanity back under one banner, he's then going to probably do away with the Space Marines entirely, as was suggested by many a lore enthusiast, and would probably bring about a new age where humanity is going to, with the new brevity of technology and new ways of circumventing the warp and all of its atrocities, among other things, they'll be more emboldened and incentivized to want to be better as a species and reclaim their former lost glory. But that is not where we are at right now. This shows a snippet of what could be, but because the Space Marines only see any type... because they're only so focused on bringing humanity back under a single banner into a single whole, and they're very very sort of like a warmongering like upbringing kind of prevents them from being able to be sufficient diplomats in this regard. I imagine this is why the Primarchs were designed, because they're meant to be more diplomatic than the Astartes that they're based on. But I imagine that this is all going to turn ahead, because despite the fact that this is clearly the ideal scenario that Horus wants, and that would probably also be just as good for the Imperium as well, there their cultural differences, at least at this point in time, are far too vast for there to really be any real semblance of common ground. And I think that's going to ultimately that's going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back here, is that they're going to be too concerned about their own ways of doing things, their own culture, to really want to embrace others. And the Interrex in particular, they don't really want to lose their independence and become just another arm of the Imperium, for probably good reason, because once they capitulate on that front, they're probably going to have to make other concessions down the road, and they're probably seeing this by the discussions with the other Astartes, HORUS, and as well as their own scholars. So, it's really going to take a lot. Like, if we were to really put real serious work into trying to reach a diplomatic solution, there would be a lot of discussions, as well as potentially policy changes, as well as some type of agreement written in paper, some type of contract or documentation that states that both sides would be independent of one another, both sides would be allowed to run things the way that they would wish to, and it would be a very binding agreement between both parties, and the first person who infracts upon this is probably going to be the biggest asshole, is how they're probably going to have to approach this. But this is the state of the situation right now. No party is willing to capitulate, and yet, despite the fact they see the clear and utter serious ramifications of a war brewing, they're very, very hesitant about wanting to lose any sort of independence, or you basically make any real sacrifices to the contrary. It's truly fascinating how diplomacy is utterly failing, both not just the Interrex but also the HORUS in this regard. But yeah, enough of my ramblings.
Perhaps the Emperor's model is too rigorous.
Those in the chamber hung their heads in silence, not wanting to catch the gaze of their Primarch.
I cannot believe this. You're wearing it on your faces, just as I am. The War Master is proposing the idea that we should defy the Emperor, and you are too scared to speak up. What has happened to us?
We have been chosen by the Emperor, beloved by all, to travel the stars and bring unity to mankind. His proclamations are absolute. We must suffer not the alien, nor the uncontrolled psyker, safeguard against the darkness of the warp. There is nothing more to interpret, nor to consider. Anything else is a profane violation against that which he has tasked us with.
And the Emperor chose me as his War Master, his most trusted son, to act as his proxy, and to do everything in my power to realize his dreams. This crusade was born from the age of strife, born from war. Merciless, unrelenting war. The approach that we practice today was adopted during a time when the only alien forms that existed were hostile, and when humans were either with us or against us. War was the only option. But that was over 200 years ago. The obstacles that stand in our way today are not the same obstacles that existed during the Age of Strife.
He is spitting facts right now. HORUS is spitting absolute bars right now, and it's insane. It really does just put a nice little stamp on the fact that this is the motherfucker who's going to start it all, who's going to create all of the problems. And it's going to be so interesting to see it happen. I can't wait.
Look around, Ezekiel. The galaxy isn't what it used to be, and the majority of war has long concluded. Why do you think the Emperor is on Terra, while we are here carrying out his plan? The people of the Interrex are not monsters, and they are not our enemy. If the Emperor were with us on this crusade, I believe he would see how vital it is that we adapt to what is happening now, not what occurred 2 centuries ago.
HORUS paused for a moment and looked around the room. No one spoke. but he had everyone's full attention.
There is no compelling reason to go to war with the Interrex, and I know that the Emperor would not want us to destroy them absent of one. As his most honored son, he has placed his complete trust in me to make these very types of decisions. And I am asking you, as my sons, to place your trust in me, just as my father has.
Alright. Just to unpack this real quick, it's kind of a big ask on Horus's part because he has been neglecting a lot of his fucking duties just to do this. I mean, I am all for Horus wanting to actually garner some type of alliance with these people. I am so for it. I am absolutely 100% on board. But god damn it, you have an entire Imperium to run at this point. You may not be the Emperor of Mankind, but you are certainly leading the charge on trying to help grow humanity's reach and expanding their resources and pool across the stars. You need to get your fucking shit together, my guy. I understand where he's coming from, truly. I want him to succeed, absolutely. But I think he needs to take a pause here and kind of delegate his duties elsewhere, because he really needs to kind of just let this go for a bit until he can actually sit down and deal with other more pressing issues before he can truly go back to this. Because the biggest problem that we're facing right now is that even if he has a legitimate reason to want to continue with these negotiations, the biggest issue stopping him right now is that he is literally not doing anything other than this. He is so focused on this. He's got a one-track mind on this, just like myself, that he needs to stop and kind of recognize, I need to do this. I need to do my tasks and my duties that require me elsewhere to be able to accomplish them. And I have so many people, so many brothers, so many delegates from the Imperium who need me to help both deal with other matters as well as engage in certain other issues. I need to just kind of put this on the back burner. And if that means that I have to go and tell them, hey, I would like to continue these negotiations, but I have matters that are more pressing elsewhere. I would like to discuss this issue of potentially reaching some type of an alliance or an agreement at a later date. So, with that being said, I'm just going to fuck right off, right? He needs to do that. He needs to be willing to have that conversation with these people, because if he doesn't, and if they become very, emboldened or despondent by that particular announcement, well, then he needs to kind of just put his foot down and be like, you're the ones who refuse to make any sort of concessions to basically want to come in lockstep with us. We're trying at every point to essentially bring us to an agreement on this matter. I am, at least. If my brothers had their way, they would just wipe you all off from the face of the earth. But I'm trying. I am probably the only voice on this matter of wanting to help you people reach some type of resolution where the Imperium of Man and the Interrex can stand side by side, not as vassals or as arms to one another, but true, actual, partners, true, a more united form of governance between both parties, and a recognition between both parties to essentially establish a more mutual standing with one another. Something of that caliber, right? And it's coming to a point, again, where it's just not happening. But yeah, I'll just leave it there. I've already harped on this point.
The sun had fallen below the horizon, and the city of Zenobia Principus, that had been bustling with activity hours before, had retired into a quiet, calming state of serenity. Jefta Nod's picturesque, six-story residence stood near the center of the city and offered breathtaking views of the coastline and the lush rainforest that made up the capital. His residence was equally quiet. All that could be heard were the soft sounds of waves crashing softly in the distance and the tranquil hum of the tropical overgrowth. Horus was inside of the palatial house, dining with the general commander and the senior envoys of the Interrex. He was hopeful that he could convince Nod to agree to a commitment that would show their talks were leading to progress. He was confident that he would have a better chance of success in a more casual environment as opposed to a formal, diplomatic meeting. He had a number of commitments that he planned to press Nod on, but there was one that was more significant than any of the others. If he could convince the Interrex to recognize the Emperor as the official authority of mankind, then the rest would fall into place. Loken was uneasy with the idea of continuing negotiations with the Interrex, but he was confident that Horus would navigate the situation with his unmatched political prowess. Sanguinius had left a few days before, ultimately deciding it was time to return to his legion and allow Horus to finalize negotiations. The Interrex did not permit foreigners to carry weapons in Zenobia Principis, but they agreed to allow a small squad of armed Astartes to serve as a protection unit for the War Master. Torgadon and 9 of his men secured the dining hall where Horus and Nod were conversing, while Loken and 9 men from 10th Company secured the remainder of the house. Nod had his own security roaming the residence, and they shared a polite nod anytime they encountered each other. Loken had been impressed with the architecture and the general aesthetics of the city, but he was astonished by the interior of Nod's residence. Elegantly framed art hung from every wall, and the house consisted of numerous freestanding plinths that held a variety of unique artifacts. Some of the artwork seemed familiar and nostalgic, while other pieces appeared to have Xenos influence. Loken turned a corner and entered the western wing of the house. Behind a stasis field and resting on a decorative base, Loken saw a tattered book that looked to be centuries old. As he motioned his hand in front of the stasis field, the pages in the book turned, and Loken began flipping through it. He closed the book to inspect the cover, and quietly read the name of it aloud to himself.
The marvelous history of evil, being a warning to mankind on the abuses of sorcery and the seduction of the demon.
That's quite an interesting one, isn't it?
Loken turned and looked at the man behind him with a look of surprise, unsure of how he was able to get so close to him without being aware of his presence. He immediately recognized him as Bryac Gordane, one of Jeff de Nod's lieutenants, which put him at ease.
Interesting. It's certainly that. Perhaps a bit of an oddity.
Bryac smiled at Loken and removed his visor.
Is there a problem, Lieutenant?
None whatsoever, Captain. You are protecting your commander, and I am protecting mine. I'm overseeing the interior patrols.
If you're not too busy, could you tell me more about this book?
Of course I can.
Bryac stepped closer and waved his hand in front of the field, flipping page after page through the book.
It's quite old, this one. It was written before the official founding of the Interrex, during the early stages of our expansion into Terra. It's one of the only copies that still exists. It's one of Lord Jeff de Nod's favorite pieces.
What is it about the book that appeals to him?
He views it as a... what was that word you used? An oddity. It's very dark and ominous. I haven't read through it in quite some time. It has tales of men venturing out from Terra into the stars, and being so fearful of the dark that they compose treatises on demons.
Demons?
Yes, Captain. This book serves as a warning against witches and sorcerers' practice, the ways in which a man might transform into a demon and prey upon his own kind. The text is a bit over the top and alarmist in nature. Lord Nord likes to think of it as a reminder. The Interrex is a mature society, and we understand the threat of chaos.
Chaos?
Yes, Captain. You act as if you're unfamiliar with it.
Perhaps I'm confused. I'm familiar with the word chaos, but you say it like it has a specific connotation.
Bryek glanced at Loken with a puzzled look.
It does have a specific connotation, Captain. It's inconceivable to think that any significant culture traveling the stars could do so without understanding the nature of chaos. We learned of the basic fundamentals from the Eldar, but we would certainly have recognized the signs eventually, with or without their guidance.
Loken stared directly into Bryek's eyes, and it was clear by the look on his face that he was utterly perplexed by what he was hearing.
Captain, is this true? Do you really not know?
I don't know what.
No. This can't be. We misread you all along. This could all have been avoided.
Lieutenant, what could have been avoided?
Captain Loken, we have made a mistake. We were wrong about you.
Bryek, I need you to explain what you are talking about.
I apologize, Captain. Chaos. Chaos is the engine of doom. It lives eternally and will exist long after we perish. All we can do is strive to recognize the sinister signs of chaos and fend it off to the best of our ability.
This means nothing to me. I have no idea what you are talking about. Be more specific.
I will. But I must go and speak with Lord Nord immediately. He needs to know about this.
No, Lieutenant. I need you to tell me here, right now.
Bryek's jovial sentiment had changed, and he shifted to a more serious tone as he spoke to Loken.
Chaos is a menacing force that lives in the Immaterium.
The Immaterium?
Sorry, Captain. I believe you refer to it as the Warp. Chaos is the root cause of the evil and corruption that exists in the cosmos. Chaos is the greatest enemy of mankind. It's like a disease. It conceals itself below the surface and spreads like a virus, destroying everything it touches from the inside. All evil, sorcery, and magic comes from chaos. And this is why we've treated you the way we have. We were overwhelmed with joy to have made contact with our long-lost Terran kin. We've waited centuries for such a momentous occasion.
I don't understand, Lieutenant. We have nothing to do with sorcery or magic.
I know this now, but when we first encountered you, we couldn't be sure. Chaos can obscure its true identity in ways that are difficult to understand, and there was no guarantee that you weren't agents of chaos. We have learned much of chaos from the Eldar. We understand its destructive power. If we were to let our guard down and allow chaos to infect us, the entire society of the Interrex would collapse. So we were overly cautious. We wanted nothing more than to embrace you, but you present yourselves as hostile, warlike beings, and there's nothing more warlike than chaos.
What do you mean by that, Lieutenant? That we present ourselves as hostile beings? We've welcomed you with open arms from the moment we made contact.
Look at yourselves, Captain. Every aspect of your presentation reeks of hostility and war. You wear bulky armor, designed solely for use in combat, and your commander calls himself the War Master. What kind of title is that? How could we not perceive you as hostile when you're led by someone named War Master? So because of this, we have hesitated to accept you. The risk of allowing chaos into our ranks was too great, but I see it now.
That is not who we are.
I know it. I'm certain of it. But now, we can stand shoulder to shoulder. We can accept you as brothers. When Lord Nord learns of this...
As Bryek Gordain listened to a voice through his internal comm relay, his eyes narrowed and he looked at Loken.
Lieutenant, are you okay?
Bryek spoke into the collar mic attached to his armor.
Understood. Commencing lockdown.
What is happening?
There's been an incident and we're enforcing a security lockdown. I don't mean to speak harshly to you, considering what you and I have just discussed, but I'm going to need you to surrender your weapons to me.
Surrender my weapons? I cannot do that while my commander is still in the building.
Bryak calmly put his visor back on and grabbed hold of his spear.
Surrender your weapons at once.
What incident are you talking about? Why do you need my weapons?
You are in our city under Interrex law, and you must surrender your weapons. Now!
Loken attempted the Vox Torgadon, but all of his channels were disabled, and his visor screens came up blank.
Are you dampening my systems?
Zenobia Principal's security networks are dampening your system. Hand over your weapons now. This is the last time I'm going to ask you.
No. I'm here to secure my commander.
Bryak stepped closer to Loken, shaking his head as he walked.
You were so close. I believed you. I really did.
I don't know what you're talking about, Bryak. We had an understanding, man to man, and now you're making no sense.
You almost fooled me, but you mistimed your attack. You revealed your intentions too quickly.
My attack?
The whole of Devices is in flames. Enough talking, Loken.
Bryak lunged at Loken with his spear, and Loken narrowly avoided him. Bryak moved at a rate of speed that was difficult to match, and Loken was unable to draw his sword in time to block his spear. 2 more spear thrusts were launched at Loken, and both of them landed against Loken's arm plate. He was shocked to see the sharp edge of the spear slice deep gashes into his armor. The spear was so long that it was keeping Loken too far away to physically engage. The ultra-thin armor worn by Bryak allowed him to move with no restriction, and Loken couldn't keep up with his speed.
Bryak, why are you doing this?
He ignored Loken's plea and pulled his spear back for another attack. Loken had suddenly realized how dire the situation was. He was there for the sole purpose of protecting his War Master, and he was now being attacked and had no way to communicate to any of his men. He didn't want to attack Bryak, and he had been focused on defending himself instead of eliminating a potential threat. But now he felt that his life was at risk, and he immediately shifted his mentality. He met Bryak's spear thrust with a forceful punch, knocking him back and dislodging the weapon from his hand. Bryak recovered and tried to regain control of his weapon, but Loken smashed his fist against it again and snapped the blade clean off. He reached out to grab the broken spear from Bryak's hands, but he quickly rotated away from him and pulled it away from his outstretched arms. Then, to Loken's surprise, he saw Bryak twist the grip of the spear and watched as it became illuminated in a blue light. Bryak swung the spear at Loken, blue sparks flying in every direction as it connected with his armor plate. The force of the blow was so strong that Loken's vision went white and he was thrown backwards, slamming into a wall and causing him to tumble to the ground. As his vision recovered, he jumped to his feet and was able to draw his sword. He swung his blade furiously at Bryak and cut deep rivets into his already damaged spear. Bryak jumped backwards, then abandoned his spear while drawing his own sword from his scabbard. Loken charged forward and blocked every attempt Bryak made to strike with his blade. The ensuing duel was a magnificent display of swordsmanship and skill, and Loken was mesmerized by Bryak's technique. His bladesmanship was completely foreign to him, having never seen or experienced anything like it before. As Bryak made an attempt to drive his sword into Loken's chest, he made his fatal mistake. Loken sidestepped the attack and sliced Bryak's hand off at the wrist, causing the sword to clatter to the ground. The Interrex officer attempted to get to his feet, but Loken smashed a closed fist against his visor and knocked him back to the floor.
This is Loken. Torgadon. Anyone.
As Loken looked up after failing to make Vox connection, he was met by 3 Interrex soldiers. They had their bows aimed at Loken, drawn and ready to attack.
Drop your weapons. Now!
Loken fired a shot from his pistol into the wall, and it was enough to convince the soldiers to drop their bows to the ground.
Stop the bleeding from his hand. If he loses much more, he's going to die.
By the time the soldiers had made it to Bryak's side to render him aid, Loken had disappeared. Loken was sprinting down a long corridor, his sole focus on securing Horus from danger. He heard bolt rounds being fired in the distance and was prepared to engage any Interrex forces he encountered. Only a moment later, something akin to a laser round screamed past Loken's head, and he quickly put the Interrex soldier responsible for the energy attack down with his bolt pistol. He entered another room and saw two of his men taking cover behind a statue.
Captain, what in the name of terror is happening?
Where are the others?
I don't know. My Vox unit failed. I'm getting nothing but static.
They're dampening us. We need to get out of here and find the War Master.
Just as they were about to move from their cover, another laser flew wide left of Sergeant William. Then Loken realized that they weren't lasers. They were arrows.
Stay down. They're attacking with bows.
William fired his bolter on full auto and eliminated two of the Interrex soldiers.
Captain, we're clear. Head through the archway straight ahead, and we can reach the...
Sergeant William never got to finish his sentence, as an arrow punched through his neck and he fell to his knees. Loken was dumbfounded by how quickly everything had changed. He went from having a monumental breakthrough with the Interrex to engaging in a full-on assault against them only moments later. It was becoming increasingly clear that they had severely underestimated the capabilities of the Interrex, and now the survival of the War Master depended on their every move. Loken evaded from his position and dodged another arrow in the process. He spotted the soldier who called Sergeant William and picked him off with a perfectly placed headshot. Following William's original plan, he passed through the archway that led into the main dining hall and walked straight into the middle of an ongoing firefight. Torgadon and two others were covering Horus from incoming fire, while another two Luna Wolves were firing at Interrex forces through a doorway at the opposite end of the hall.
Tarek, what happened here?
This is a mistake. All of this. Something has gone terribly wrong.
Loken took cover behind a scattering of chairs and a large dining cart. A Luna Wolf lay dead on the floor next to him, with two arrows sticking through his chest. Loken popped out of cover to exchange fire and saw another Luna Wolf catch an arrow and fall to the ground in agony. They traded attacks for another few minutes before Loken and Torgadon's squad eliminated the remaining Interrex forces in the hall.
Tarek, we need to get him out of here now. We have to get him to safety.
I'm not going anywhere. We cannot leave like this.
We have no choice. Follow me.
Loken led the way out of the hall, and Horus, Torgadon, and three others followed close behind. They encountered more Interrex forces as they desperately moved to escape the residence. And after 15 minutes of tumultuous combat, they reached the streets outside. While Loken and Torgadon's squads were securing Nod's residence, the rest of the Imperial Party was locked down at the Extranus. Loken knew that their only hope of survival was to regroup with the rest of the Luna Wolves before they were swarmed by more Interrex soldiers. Sirens echoed throughout the city streets, and they could hear gunfire and laser weapons only a short distance away. They were running through the city streets when one of the Astartes in their squad was hit with a blue energy beam. The blast incinerated his armor and burnt his flesh so severely that there was no question that the strike was fatal. Torgadon quickly responded and dispatched of the enemy with 3 successive bolt rounds.
We can't stay out in these streets. We have to get to the Extranus.
No! I am not retreating. A mistake was made, and we have to correct it.
Lord, you're too vulnerable right now. We have to get you to safety.
Horus couldn't have expected that his dinner with Jeff and Nod would have devolved into an armed conflict, and because of this, he was not dressed for battle. He was wearing robes instead of his plate armor, and he was completely unarmed and ill-suited to engage with the enemy.
I am not going to the Extranus. Do what you must to protect me, but if we don't make an effort to stop this, then everything we have worked for will have been for nothing.
And everything will have been for nothing if you die in these streets, Lord.
I won't discuss this further. I'm not leaving.
As the chaotic sounds of warfare and panic reverberated through the city, Horus looked at his sons of exasperation.
I don't understand this. What went wrong? Out of nowhere, Naud was overcome with anger. He lashed out at me and said that we had betrayed them.
Something similar happened to me, Lord.
What do you mean?
On my security patrol, I came across one of Naud's officers. He was telling me of chaos and that the Interrex feared we had brought it with us. In the middle of our conversation, he made the same claim that Naud did to you.
What does that mean? That we brought chaos with us?
I didn't fully understand what he was talking about. He said that chaos is the greatest enemy of mankind, that it spreads like a disease. He said that is why they were so hesitant to engage with us, because they feared we were agents of chaos.
Jubal. He's talking about Jubal and the warp. The Emperor warned me of this and I failed to recognize it.
And failed to recognize what?
The warp. I thought we were safe, but I was wrong. It's here. It has tainted the Interrex.
Lord, I don't think that is what happened. The Interrex are trying to protect themselves from the warp. He said that we attacked them, that we set fire to the Hall of Devices.
This is what Naud said to me as well. That we stole their weapons. That is where we must go.
We can't go there, Lord. It's too dangerous.
Either you come with me, or I will go by myself. But I am going to the Hall of Devices.
I mean, am I the only one who thinks that sounds like a fucking suicide mission? I mean, the Hall of Devices, remember, has a lot of dangerous technology there, kept there for a fucking reason. Not only that, but Xenos made technology as well. You really want to walk into that with the way you're dressed and among other things, with only like a handful of Astartes to back you up? That sounds like fucking crazy talk to me, my guy. And you're supposed to be the fucking War Master. I'm just saying, man. That sounds like a fucking suicide mission, if you ask me.
Loken and Torgadon knew that Horus wouldn't be swayed, and they couldn't let him go by himself. The Hall of Devices was a short distance from where they were, and they could see the wreckage before they arrived. Thick smoke rose from the hall, and Interrex corpses were strewn about in front of the burning structure. As they walked closer, they recognized a man walking towards them, his clothing caked in ash and his flesh scorched from the blaze.
We should never have invited you here. We were fools to have trusted you.
We are not responsible for this.
Dias Shen ignored the plea of Horus, speaking the last words before he succumbed to death.
Our hall is burning. Our people are dying, and for what? If you wanted to know our weapons, you could have asked, but you had to steal them. We welcomed you as guests, and you stuck a knife in our backs.
Abracarius, please listen to me. I need to speak with Jefta Naud. This is all a terrible mistake.
Shen never responded. He fell to the ground and died before the War Master's eyes.
Somebody help him, please.
Groups of Interrex soldiers were approaching in growing numbers, and Torgadon informed the rest of the squad.
We have enemy soldiers approaching from the east.
Enemies? They are not our enemies, Tariq.
More Luna Wolves were arriving, apparently having abandoned their positions on the Extranus, and they were forming into battle positions. Loken and Torgadon had already accepted what was happening, but Horus was still hanging on, still clinging to the hope that order could be restored. He looked up at the sky and spoke to himself.
Why have you forsaken me, Father? Why was I left to do this alone? It is too much.
Second company! The enemy is almost upon us!
No, hold! I demand to speak with Jefta Naud. Someone, get Jefta Naud at once!
Lord, it's too late. Take my blade.
No, it's not! We can salvage this!
Fire on my command!
Tariq, no! Hold your fire!
The Interrex were within firing range, and they launched a volley of arrows from their bows. Horus had opened his mouth to scream another command, but before he could make a sound, an arrow had ruptured his arm. Horus ripped the arrow from his arm and tossed the blood-stained projectile to the ground.
We came here in peace! But if you want to fear us, we're going to give you a damn good reason!
Horus gripped the blade that Loken had handed him and raised it into the air.
For the Emperor!
It had taken Horus until this very moment to realize what was happening. This was no longer a misunderstanding to be resolved. The war that he had been fighting so hard to prevent from happening was underway. The dark sky lit up from gunfire and explosions. Horus was attacking Interrex soldiers face to face, stopping them dead in their tracks and cutting them to pieces. Loken watched him swing his blade with a ferocity that he had never seen in the War Master before. The battle raged on, and the streets of Zenobia Principus ran with the blood of war. Horus was so close to securing the most significant alliance in the history of the Imperium, perhaps even closer than he understood. And in the blink of an eye, it was all gone. Horus was soon to learn that his fate, as well as the fate of the entire Imperium, had forever changed that night. And as he gathered into a ring formation with his Mournival sons and prepared for a final stand, Loken screamed into the air,
For the War Master!
They were so goddamn close. They really were. They were so fucking close to actually brokering a peace. If only... See, this is the problem, is that they were bouncing around the topic too much, and they were engaging too much in peace talks to really... And I don't... Fucking... Who knows what the hell they were talking about? But you're just like... You would think you would just ask straight out, by the way, are you aware of this thing called chaos? Do you know what chaos is? Would you happen to be users of chaos? Or do you employ it in any fashion? Like, you think they would have asked this question at some point, but they never did. That's fairly evident. It's really amazing how stupid this is in retrospect. Because all of this could have been solved. All of these problems likely never would have occurred if they had if Loken and Bryak had this conversation sooner, or if Horus and Jefta Naud, or Shen, if for that matter, had mentioned this in earlier conversations, then it just would have been a fast pass. It would have just been a complete run through of working together and just kind of brokering some level of peace, as well as some type of mutual understanding and recognition between both parties, being, like, working together as sovereign nations and sovereign entities into themselves. But they didn't do that. No, they didn't have these talks. Instead, they bounced around these topics, and they never really engaged in any real discourse about, like, do you know what chaos is? Are you aware of chaos? What is chaos to you? Do you understand what the implication is if you were to do this and that? Like, they never had these conversations, and that just seems like a really stupid fucking thing that this is the result of that. You think they would actually ask these questions in the meetings, just like, through all the months they've been trying to do this, and it just never happened? Like, they just never found the opportunity to just be like, by the way, do you know what these things are? It's just crazy to me. Do you know what a demon is? So stupid. It's kind of weird that this is the thing that kind of, like, kept both parties at bay. Though granted, I guess for the Interex's part, they did say that this is something that's so common knowledge to them and to most civilizations that they just assume that the fucking that the Imperium and that Horus would already be aware of this, but they were not. No one was aware of this because the Emperor made sure to not mention any of these details to them during the course of the crusade, which is a really fucking terrible decision on his part because it kind of led to the sacking of an entire advanced civilization, one that was a little bit more put together and well on its way to be something that could work in tandem with the Imperium and perhaps could have actually prevented, perhaps the influence of the Interex probably could have prevented the zealotry that would have resulted from Horus committing the heresy and then the Emperor getting stuck on his throne, among other things. Like, they could have been a more of a reasonable voice in all of the chaos, but that's not. This is not the story that was told, and this is not the outcome that was made. This is all just a whole cavalcade of terrible fucking decision making. It's crazy. Anyways, that's just amazing. And the only reason why this happened is because of Erebus. Yes, that's right. The reason why, I'm sure it's going to get into this in the epilogue, but Erebus very much is the one who caused this whole thing to start, and we're going to figure that out in about 5 seconds, I'm sure. That, or it'll be a nice juicy detail for later.
For more than a month, we tried. Even when they were showing no willingness to accept us, we never ceased our attempts to bond with them. But we were unsuccessful.
So what will the War Master do about the Interex now?
The only thing he can. I'm sure he will attempt to make peace with them.
What if he isn't able to?
Then we'll finish what we started on Zenobia, which is more than likely what will happen.
And what about us? What's next?
We carry on. In a month's time, we will converge with the 203rd Fleet at Sardis. Before that, we will make a detour to assist First Chaplain Erebus resolve a minor dispute on some quiet moon in the Davin system.
Mercedy nodded softly in response. She sat quietly, watching as Loken continued meticulously polishing his armor.
I was thinking about what you told me the day after you were extracted from the city, and there's something I can't make sense of.
And what is that?
The fighting began after the Interex accused you of stealing an anatheme weapon.
A weapon that we did not take.
Right. But if it wasn't us, then who was it?
I have no idea. Maybe it was one of their own people. Maybe it wasn't actually taken at all, and they used it as an excuse to attack us. Either way, we are the sons of Horus. We have no shortage of our own weapons. I can't imagine what any of us would want with a vile alien blade.
"6 weeks had passed since the Battle of Zenobia Principus. The battle had been fierce, with the Interex and the Luna Wolves fighting until the sun rose the following morning. After leaving the Extranus with 2 companies of Luna Wolves, Abaddon and Aximan battled Nod's soldiers outside of the central control stations of Zenobia Principus. They attacked the control stations and restored their communication systems, allowing them to eventually organize a full extraction. Horus sent a final missive to Jeff and Nod, denying the accusations that had been leveled against them and sharing his sincere regret at what had occurred. He never received a response. In the weeks following the incident on Zenobia, the War Master made the announcement that the Legion would no longer be known as the Luna Wolves, and would instead be renamed to the Sons of Horus. The War Master spoke to the Mournival about his decision, and explained that after careful consideration, he came to see the importance of expounding the Legion's authority. From Kyril Cinderman, surrounded by piles of ancient books in the archive halls, to Euphrates Keeler, who was secretly praying to her god, the Emperor of Mankind, The news of the War Master's declaration spread rapidly through the vengeful spirit and was celebrated by all that inhabited the flagship. Yet in spite of their support of the War Master's decision, there were a few who quietly wondered to themselves what had gone wrong with the Interrex. Like Mercedy Olaton, Kyril Cinderman couldn't stop thinking about the Anathame blade. He thought back to what Jeff Denard had said about the bespoke weapon, and how the alien blade was designed for use against a specific, defined target.
Maybe it was demons in particular it was used against. Super vagueness is what led to this war. God.
The vengeful spirit ripped through space and was rapidly approaching its destination in the Davin system. Yet unbeknownst to anyone occupying the Imperial vessel, the fate of the Imperium was about to change forever.
It really does paint an interesting picture, doesn't it? We have the opposite problem, whereas we are abusing terms way too often to point fingers at people on a daily basis. These motherfuckers cannot define a term or a specific entity without first engaging in a bunch of blustering, paltry fucking levels of fucking vagueness and stupidity. It's just amazing. I can't even describe how annoying that is. It took vagueness to completely destroy and cripple this whole alliance. That is so disappointing. And that's not a criticism of the writing, mind you. That's just a criticism of the setting. It's like, how the fuck do you not point... Like, how do these people not point out or call a spade a spade? It's crazy. You know, like, I tend to play around with vagueness myself when it comes to covering certain topics and questions online. But that's because I don't want to throw any sort of, like, defining accusations or wide-sweeping generalizations. I do it for safety reasons. I do it for anti-persecution reasons. Rather than fucking because, you know, I just want to be a sussy boy. It's so stupid. God damn it.
Deep in the belly of the vengeful spirit, through dark corridors and rusted doorways, lie a small, long-forgotten mechanical chamber that no one had stepped foot in for decades. And under the light of a single candle, a man in modest, dark robes looked down and quietly spoke.
By the will of the true gods, I name thee, your fate bound to the Anathame. HORUS Lupercal.
Brilliant. It's fucking brilliant. Everything about this was brilliant. Once again, Warrior Tier pulling out another W, pulling out clutch again for another excellent fucking video. Again, go support the original creator, go support Warrior Tier, go support the Son of Horus video. Leave a like and subscribe if you haven't. And again, you know, if you're interested to see the full story and context, go read the Horus Rising. It's all based off of that work, so you would be doing yourself a favor by engaging in the source material. But yeah, that is an excellent video. I gotta say, man, it is truly interesting to see where this is gonna go next. I cannot fucking wait. You know, Erebus really is something to really behold, isn't he? Like, he's such an asshole of a character, but he's really passes himself off as just being more so of like being a stand-up guy, which is the craziest thing. Like, I never really knew what kind of personality he had other than the dark sort of sludge of character that he has. Like, is like lore established wise, like he is very much like a garbage human being, and you know, in personification, in just human form. I mean, like, if you're, in case you guys need context as to what kind of person Erebus is, right? Like, this is a guy who, on his home planet of whatever the fuck it was called, he literally grew up, like, picking the legs off of scorpions and spiders, and as well as their stingers, just so that way he can watch them fight amongst themselves. Like, he is such a monster. And then there's the fact that I believe he murdered a guy and stole his name. So his name isn't even truly Erebus, but that could also be Lorgar. I have no idea. I'm pretty sure Lorgar grew up in a more upstanding sort of like a more established family. But yeah, Erebus kind of was like living in squalor, I believe, and then he basically stole the look, tattoos, and killed the person who originally bore the name, and then he just assumed his identity and passed himself off as a priest, like a real fucking parasite. Erebus, from every conception, is a absolute dog shit human being, just a truly god tier level hateable character, outside of Leandros. But that's only because Leandros stands against Titus on everything, because he likes to be such a fucking contrarian. But anyways, you know, to the point to where he basically commits the cardinal sin of backstabbing people, but, you know, that's neither here or there. Point being, Erebus is dog shit. He's got the reputation that he has for legitimate reasons, and I am all for it to see it in the next video. I truly want to see it. I want to see the fall of Horus. I want to see Erebus's, you know, like, participation in it. I want to see how he goes about doing that. And I can't wait to see, like, how in the next video we're going to get a explanation and a thorough dive into how Horus is going to fall. I know the specifics on how he falls, but I feel like that unless it's given the necessary due time and diligence that it needs to kind of get that thing, you know, thoroughly looked at and kind of explained before the inevitable fall, it's not going to stick very well for a lot of people, because the original reason as to why Horus fell in the first place was because of some shit that Erebus was feeding him. Not only did he make him question and doubt the Emperor and the Imperium as a whole, but he also inflicted his dreams when he in his mind with thoughts and like thoughts and things about how he's not going to be, like, he's not gonna. The general idea and consensus is that he got so petty as he was because they didn't erect a statue for him and his name and everything and all that. But I think but of course it was a bit more than that. His contributions and his inevitable achievements were not recorded for history, and they were going to be wiped out. Which honestly, if we're gonna be kind of honest, you know, the Emperor was kind of seemingly heading in that direction. Kind of, sort of. He was going to wipe out the Astartes at some point, you know, theoretically. You know, it's all theory crafting. But the Custodes exist, and they exist for a reason, so, you know, who knows. But the point is, right, because I'm not too sure on all of the specifics with the lore of 40k, but I find it very fascinating. I want to see how the fall is going to be portrayed in Warrior Tiers video format. I want to see how he's going to portray it. I want to see how we're going to delve into this, because, to be honest, I think that the real problem is that Horus is probably going to turn, not necessarily because of the fact that he won't be necessarily remembered, but because of the fact that he feels like all of his achievements, everything that he's accomplished, and that's kind of what these books are trying to serve, right? They're trying to make the fall feel more feel more credible. You know, like, kind of like the fall of Anakin Skywalker, right? Because I'm a Star Wars nerd. But, you know, like, it's all building up to this point to where it's just like all of the grievances, all of the problems, all of the issues, the pressing issues, right? And all of the questions levied both at Horus's feet that then gets passed over to the Emperors by Horus. It's all going to culminate into a situation where he's going to see all of his deeds, all of his accomplishments be erased by the Emperor, and it's going to feel like such a fucking slap in the face that he's going to want to actively rebel against him, undermine the Emperor, and is going to want to essentially rule as the new head of the Imperium, the new leader of mankind, and I can't wait to see it. Because on some level, right, I feel like Horus is absolutely valid in hating the Emperor. I think most of the Primarchs who end up betraying the Emperor have a valid reason for wanting to hate the Emperor on some level, because he really doesn't do himself any favors. He's kind of an asshole, not gonna lie. But that's kind of the charm of it, right? That's kind of the interesting thing about it, is that the Emperor has his reasons for why he does the things that he does. And although I feel like the way he handled Angron's situation was a little too ham-fisted, a little too blunt force, I feel like that maybe on some level it might have been justified if it was like he had to move on from the situation, he had more pressing issues, didn't have time to really play around with Angron's situation and problems. He just needed Angron to come onto the ship and basically serve as the vanguard of his legion and stop being such a whiny bitch about everything. But like that's still an L move. But I can't begin to understand why fucking the Emperor would do that unless he just had more pressing matters to attend to. It's just so stupid. Like he really fucked that up. And I don't know how to rationalize that. Anyways, I've kind of rambled on for long enough. This was an excellent video. Please go support the original creator again. Please, please, please give this video a like. Share it around. This is such an interesting story on its own that you could share this around to anyone from beginning to end, and I'm sure a lot of people would find this very interesting and fascinating just on its surface without even knowing the context of the full lore or what's about to happen. It really is a worthwhile watch. So, yeah, with that being said, thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next video. Bye-bye.